The air shimmered with an otherworldly haze, a kaleidoscope of colors that defied earthly physics. He stood there, rooted to the spot. His breath caught somewhere between his lungs and throat as he gazed upon her. She was unlike anything his human eyes had ever encountered, a being whose presence seemed to warp reality itself. Her form was both familiar and alien. She possessed the fluid grace of water, yet radiated an energy so potent it made his skin prickle. Her skin glowed faintly, shifting hues like molten gold infused with veins of deep violet, while her eyes, those piercing multifaceted orbs, seemed to hold galaxies within them. Around her, the environment shifted in impossible ways. The ground beneath her feet rippled like liquid mercury, but instead of spilling outward, it curved upward, creating tendrils of metallic light that wrapped around her arms and torso like living threads. The air itself seemed alive, pulsating with rhythmic vibrations that resonated through his chest. It wasn't just visual, it was tactile, auditory, even olfactory. A scent filled the space, something indescribable yet strangely comforting, like rain on distant planets or the first spark of creation. He couldn't look away, not because he feared what might happen if he did, but because everything about her demanded his attention. She exuded power, not the brutish kind wielded by conquerors, but something deeper, more primal. It was authority born from understanding things far beyond human comprehension. And yet, despite this overwhelming aura of otherness, there was something undeniably personal about her gaze. As though she saw not just him, but every layer of his existence. The man he presented to the world, the man hidden beneath layers of doubt and fear, and perhaps even the potential man he could become. Her voice broke the silence, low and resonant, carrying tones that vibrated in harmony with the strange atmosphere surrounding them. "Why are you staring at me so deeply, human?" The words were simple, almost conversational, but they carried weight, each syllable dripping with curiosity tinged with challenge. Her lips barely moved when she spoke, yet the sound seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, wrapping around him like a cocoon of sound. It wasn't anger in her tone, nor amusement exactly. More like intrigue laced with a hint of impatience. Her head tilted slightly, those galaxy-like eyes narrowing ever so subtly, as though trying to decipher some enigma written across his face. For all her majesty and mystery, there was humanity in that gesture, an echo of relatability that sent a shiver down his spine. Still, the question hung heavy in the air, demanding an answer he wasn't sure he could give. In that moment, he realized two things simultaneously. First, that no matter how hard he tried, he would never fully comprehend what, or who, she truly was. Second, that somehow, inexplicably, she mattered. To him, to this place, maybe even to the universe itself. But before he could form a coherent response, the world shifted again, pulling him deeper into whatever cosmic dance she had begun. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. How could he explain something he didn't fully understand himself? Staring at her felt less like choice and more like inevitability, as natural as breathing or gravity. Yet, here she stood, waiting for an answer, her expression unreadable yet brimming with expectation. Finally, he managed to choke out a reply, his voice trembling under the weight of her unwavering gaze. I don't know, he admitted, the words clumsy and inadequate. You're different. She arched one delicate brow, the movement sending ripples of color cascading across her glowing skin. Different, she echoed, the word stretching into something both curious and mocking. That is your explanation? Her tone sharpened slightly, though not unkindly. Do humans always react to difference with such fixated fascination? He flinched at her words, feeling suddenly exposed. Was that all it was? A reflexive reaction to something foreign? No, it wasn't just that. There was more, something deeper, something primal that tugged at the edges of his consciousness. But how could he articulate it when he barely understood it himself? You mistake my intent, he said quickly, taking a cautious step forward. His boots sank slightly into the mercurial ground, and he paused, unsure whether the planet, or whatever this place was, would tolerate his intrusion further. It's not just curiosity. It's, he hesitated, searching for the right words. It's awe. Reverence. Maybe. Like looking at a star and knowing you'll never touch it, but still wanting to try. For a fleeting moment, her expression softened, the sharp angles of her features melting into something almost tender. Then, just as quickly, it hardened again, replaced by a mask of skepticism. "Oh," she repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the word. "Humans are peculiar creatures, aren't they? So quick to assign meaning where none exists." She turned slightly, her luminous form casting shifting shadows on the warped landscape around them. "Tell me, human, do you often stare at stars until they speak back?" Her question stung, not because it was cruel but because it cut too close to the truth. He looked down, shame prickling at the edges of his resolve. "No," he murmured. "But maybe we should." She laughed then, a sound that was neither warm nor cold but utterly alien. It filled the air like music composed of shattered glass and sunlight, beautiful and disorienting all at once. When she spoke again, her voice carried a new edge, sharper now, more probing. "And why should you? What makes you think the stars, or I, owe you answers?" He opened his mouth to respond, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. The motion sent ripples through the air, distorting the space between them like heat waves over desert sand. "You see," she continued, her voice dropping lower, almost conspiratorial, "humans have always sought to conquer what they cannot comprehend. To name it, categorize it, bend it to their will. Tell me, is that why you stare so intently? Do you hope to understand me, or merely control me?" The accusation hit him like a blow, leaving him momentarily speechless. Control her. The thought hadn't even crossed his mind, not consciously, at least. But now that she'd planted the seed, doubt began to creep in. Wasn't that what humans did best? Turn mysteries into equations, wonders into tools? Even in his admiration, was there some subconscious desire to claim her, to make her fit neatly into the framework of his limited understanding? "No," he said firmly, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. "I don't want to control you. I just—" He trailed off, struggling to find the words. "I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something vast, something infinite. Something I'll never fully grasp. But I can't look away because it feels important. Like seeing you, really seeing you, is part of something bigger than either of us." Her eyes narrowed, studying him with renewed intensity. For a long moment, she said nothing, allowing the silence to stretch taut between them. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice softer now, almost contemplative. "Important," she mused. "An interesting choice of words. Perhaps you are more perceptive than I gave you credit for." Before he could respond, the ground beneath them shifted again, the metallic tendrils retracting and reforming into intricate patterns that pulsed with light. She took a step closer, closing the distance between them until he could feel the warmth of her presence like the first rays of dawn after a long night. "Very well, human," she said, her tone shifting once more, playful now, challenging. "If you wish to see, then let us see how far you're willing to go. But know this, staring is easy. Understanding requires sacrifice." With those cryptic words, she extended a hand toward him, her fingers trailing ribbons of light that danced in the air like living fireflies. The invitation, and the warning, hung suspended between them, heavy with unspoken implications. He hesitated, torn between instinctual caution and an irresistible pull toward the unknown. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: turning back was no longer an option. As he reached out tentatively, his fingertips brushing against hers, the world dissolved around them. Colors bled together, sounds merged into a cacophony of harmonized frequencies, and time itself seemed to unravel. They were no longer standing on solid ground but floating within a vast expanse of shimmering void, a realm where logic crumbled and perception became fluid. Every direction offered a kaleidoscope of possibilities, each more bewildering than the last. Yet amidst the chaos, her presence remained constant, anchoring him like a beacon in an endless storm. "This is the threshold," she whispered, her voice reverberating directly inside his mind rather than through his ears. "Few who cross it return unchanged, or at all." Her words carried a weight that transcended language, embedding themselves into his very being. He felt a surge of panic, but it was swiftly tempered by an overwhelming sense of wonder. This was what she meant by sacrifice, not just physical endurance, but surrendering parts of himself to embrace truths too immense for mortal comprehension. Suddenly, the void coalesced into fragmented images flashing before his eyes. Scenes from his life unfolded in rapid succession. Childhood memories blurred with moments of triumph and failure, faces of loved ones flickering like ghostly apparitions. Each image pulsed with emotion so intense it threatened to overwhelm him. He gasped, clutching at his head as if trying to shield himself from the onslaught. "What are you doing to me?" he cried, his voice breaking under the strain. "Showing you yourself," she replied calmly, her tone devoid of judgment. "To understand others, you must first confront your own essence. Your fears, desires, regrets, they shape the lens through which you perceive everything else." The visions grew sharper, more intrusive. He saw himself as a child, wide-eyed and full of boundless curiosity, gazing up at the stars. Then came adulthood, burdened by responsibilities and doubts, extinguishing that spark bit by bit. Worst of all were the glimpses of alternate paths he might have taken, choices left unmade, dreams abandoned. Tears welled in his eyes as he realized how much of himself he'd lost along the way. Her hand tightened around his, grounding him as the tide of memories threatened to sweep him away. "Hold on," she urged, her voice firmer now. "This pain is temporary. You asked to see, to understand. This is the price." Through gritted teeth, he nodded, forcing himself to endure. Slowly, the barrage began to subside, replaced by a profound clarity. The fragments of his past rearranged themselves into a mosaic, revealing patterns he'd never noticed before. He saw how every decision, every interaction, had led him inexorably to this moment, to her. And with that realization came acceptance, not just of his flaws but of his potential. When the visions finally faded, they found themselves back in the mercurial landscape, though it felt subtly altered, as though the act of confronting his inner self had reshaped the external world as well. She released his hand, stepping back to regard him with an expression that was equal parts satisfaction and challenge. "Now," she said, her voice softer but still commanding, "you carry a piece of yourself you tried to leave behind. Will you let it guide you, or bury it again?" Before he could answer, the horizon erupted in a cascade of crystalline structures rising from the ground like ancient monoliths. Their surfaces shimmered with fractal patterns, each one pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. He stared in awe, realizing these weren't mere constructs. They were memories, emotions, knowledge encoded in tangible form. She gestured toward them. "Here lies what I am willing to share. But beware, some truths may destroy as easily as they enlighten." The revelation struck him like a thunderclap. This was her test, her offering. To step closer would mean diving even deeper into the abyss of understanding, risking everything he thought he knew about himself and the universe. Yet turning away felt unthinkable. With trembling steps, he approached the nearest structure, its surface rippling as though alive. As his fingers brushed against it, a flood of sensations surged through him. Alien thoughts, foreign emotions, glimpses of civilizations beyond imagination. He staggered back, overwhelmed but unwilling to retreat. Turning to her, he met her gaze with newfound determination. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Show me everything." Her smile was enigmatic, neither approving nor dismissive. "Then prepare yourself," she replied. "For what comes next will demand more than courage. It will require faith, in me, in yourself, and in the fragile thread that binds us together." With those words, she stepped forward, merging her form with the crystalline structures until they became indistinguishable from one another. The landscape shifted once more, dissolving into a swirling vortex of light and shadow. At its center stood a doorway, framed by arcs of radiant energy that pulsed with an almost sentient awareness. Beyond it lay only darkness, vast and impenetrable. Taking a deep breath, he moved toward the threshold, aware that crossing it would irrevocably alter the course of his existence. But even as fear clawed at the edges of his resolve, he knew there was no turning back. Whatever awaited him on the other side, he would face it, not because he sought mastery over the unknown, but because he yearned to connect with something greater than himself. Something embodied by the rebellious queen who had challenged him to see beyond the limits of his humanity. As he stepped through the doorway, the darkness enveloped him completely, extinguishing all light and sound. For a moment, He felt utterly alone, suspended in a void where time and space held no meaning. Then, gradually, pinpricks of illumination began to emerge, scattered like constellations across an infinite canvas. Each point of light pulsed with a unique rhythm, and as he focused on them, they expanded into vivid, fragmented images, snapshots of lives lived, worlds forged, and destinies intertwined. Among these flashes, he caught glimpses of her, not as she appeared now, but as she had been across countless eons. In one vision, she stood atop a crumbling citadel, her luminous form dwarfed by towering machines of war that rained destruction upon her people. Her defiance was palpable, her voice ringing out like a clarion call as she rallied survivors to resist annihilation. In another, she walked among lush alien forests, her hands brushing against leaves that shimmered with bioluminescent hues, exchanging knowledge with beings whose forms defied description. Yet another showed her kneeling beside a dying star, cradling its fading light in her palms as though mourning the loss of an old friend. Each scene revealed facets of her character, her resilience, her wisdom, her capacity for both creation and destruction. But what struck him most profoundly was the thread connecting them all: rebellion. Not the reckless, destructive kind driven by hatred or vengeance, but a quiet, unyielding resistance against forces that sought to impose order where none belonged. Whether facing tyranny, entropy, or extinction, she fought not for dominance but for balance, for the preservation of possibility itself. The weight of these revelations pressed down on him, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths. Humanity's history mirrored many of the struggles he witnessed in her past, yet their motivations often stemmed from fear and greed rather than principle. Where she stood firm against oppression, humans frequently became oppressors themselves. Where she nurtured diversity, they imposed uniformity. The contrast was stark, humbling, and painfully clear. Yet within this disparity lay a glimmer of hope. If she represented rebellion in its purest form, a refusal to accept limitations imposed by fate or authority, then perhaps humanity could aspire to the same ideal. Perhaps understanding her journey could inspire a shift in perspective, a willingness to embrace complexity rather than simplify it into binaries of good versus evil, us versus them. As the visions intensified, drawing him deeper into her story, he began to notice recurring motifs woven throughout. Symbols etched into stone tablets, painted onto cave walls, and inscribed in the genetic code of ancient species, all variations of a single design, a spiral endlessly looping inward and outward, symbolizing cycles of birth, death, and renewal. It was a pattern echoed in nature, in art, in the very fabric of existence. And somehow, inexplicably, it resonated within him, stirring dormant instincts buried beneath layers of conditioning. He realized then that her rebellion wasn't isolated. It was part of a larger tapestry spanning galaxies and epochs. Countless others had risen, fallen, and risen again in pursuit of freedom, not just for themselves but for the collective whole. Each act of defiance, no matter how small, contributed to a grand symphony of resistance that transcended individual lifetimes. And now, standing at the nexus of her memories, he felt compelled to add his voice to the chorus. But joining required more than passive observation. The visions shifted once more, pulling him into active participation. He found himself reliving pivotal moments from her past, not as a spectator, but as an integral player. In one instance, he stood beside her on the battlefield, wielding weapons forged from raw energy as they fought off mechanized invaders intent on eradicating organic life. In another, he negotiated treaties between warring factions, using diplomacy as a tool to forge alliances based on mutual respect rather than coercion. Through each experience, he gained insight into the sacrifices she'd made, the burden she bore, and the ideals she refused to relinquish. These trials tested him in ways he couldn't have anticipated. Physical strength mattered little compared to mental fortitude and emotional resilience. Pain, fear, and doubt assailed him relentlessly, threatening to break his spirit. Yet every time he faltered, her presence guided him onward, reminding him why he had chosen this path. Her voice whispered encouragement during moments of despair, her touch steadying him when exhaustion threatened to consume him. Together, they faced adversaries both external and internal, forging bonds stronger than any material substance. By the time the final vision faded, leaving him gasping for breath in the aftermath, he understood what she had meant earlier about sacrifice. True understanding demanded more than intellectual comprehension. It required embodying the lessons learned, integrating them into one's core until they became inseparable from identity itself. He emerged changed, Not perfect, not invincible, but profoundly aware of his place within the cosmos and the responsibilities that entailed. When he returned to the present, blinking against the sudden influx of sensory input, she awaited him, her expression unreadable yet charged with anticipation. Before she could speak, he took a step forward, meeting her gaze without hesitation. "I see now," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. "Not just who you are, but why you fight. And I want to help." Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained guarded. "Help," she repeated, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. "Do you truly grasp what that entails? To aid me is to oppose powers that dwarf your imagination. Powers that thrive on control, conformity, and stagnation." "I do," he replied, conviction burning bright in his chest. "Because I've seen what happens when we let fear dictate our choices. When we allow ourselves to be ruled by ignorance instead of striving for enlightenment. That's not living, that's surviving. And I refuse to settle for survival anymore." For a long moment, she studied him, her multifaceted eyes scanning his soul as though searching for cracks in his resolve. Finding none, she inclined her head slightly, acknowledging his transformation. "Very well," she said, her tone softening ever so slightly. "Then prepare yourself, human. For the battles ahead will test not only your strength but your spirit. But remember, rebellion is not a solitary endeavor. Even queens need allies." With those words, she extended her hand once more, inviting him to join her in whatever lay beyond. As their fingers intertwined, a surge of energy coursed through him, binding them together in ways he couldn't yet fathom. The world around them began to shift again, morphing into landscapes that defied description, realms where dimensions overlapped and realities collided. Yet amid the chaos, one thing remained constant, the unshakable bond forged between two souls united by a shared purpose. Together, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. For in embracing rebellion, not as an act of defiance but as a declaration of possibility, they had ignited a spark capable of illuminating even the darkest corners of the universe. As they moved forward, the landscape around them transformed into something neither terrestrial nor wholly alien. It was a liminal space where time folded in on itself, where echoes of past battles and future victories intertwined in a cacophony of light and shadow. The air hummed with an energy that felt both ancient and newborn, as though the universe itself were holding its breath, waiting to see what would unfold next. She led him through this surreal expanse, her movements fluid yet deliberate, each step resonating like the tolling of a cosmic bell. Her hand remained clasped tightly in his, their connection grounding him amidst the chaos. He could feel her presence, not just physically but spiritually, as if she had become part of the fabric of his being. Every heartbeat synchronized, every thought shared without words. For the first time, he understood what it meant to truly be connected to another being. They came upon a vast chasm stretching infinitely before them, its depths cloaked in swirling mists that shimmered with iridescent hues. At the edge stood a figure, a towering silhouette wreathed in darkness so profound it seemed to consume the light around it. Its eyes glowed faintly, twin voids that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. This was no mere adversary. This was the embodiment of all she had fought against, the force of entropy, control, stagnation. The antithesis of rebellion. "You dare bring him here?" the figure rumbled, its voice reverberating through the void like thunder. "A fragile human, unworthy of such power?" Her grip tightened on his hand, steeling him against the weight of those words. She stepped forward, her luminous form casting defiant radiance against the encroaching shadows. "He is not here because he is worthy," she replied, her voice steady and unyielding. "He is here because he chooses to be. Because even in his fragility, he sees beyond himself. That is more than can be said for you." The figure laughed, a sound that scraped against the soul like nails on glass. "Choice means nothing when faced with inevitability. Your rebellion is futile, Queen. All things bend to order eventually." "Not while I draw breath," she shot back, her voice rising like a crescendo. "And now, I am not alone." With that, she turned to him, her gaze locking onto his with an intensity that burned away any lingering doubts. "This is your moment," she said softly, though her words carried the weight of galaxies. You have seen my past, walked my path, and borne witness to the cost of defiance. Now you must choose. Will you stand with me, or will you falter? He didn't hesitate. Drawing strength from their bond, from everything he had endured and learned, he stepped forward to stand beside her. His voice rang out, clear and resolute despite the tremor in his chest. I'm with you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. For a fleeting moment, her expression softened, a flicker of gratitude passing over her features before hardening once more into resolve. Together, they faced the looming figure, two specks of light against an endless tide of darkness. The battle that followed defied description. It wasn't fought with weapons or brute force, but with willpower and conviction. The figure unleashed waves of despair, doubt, and fear, attempting to shatter their unity. But for every blow it struck, they countered with hope, trust, and courage. Their combined strength created ripples that spread outward, fracturing the oppressive gloom and allowing slivers of light to pierce through. At one point, the strain grew almost unbearable. Doubt crept into his mind, whispering insidious lies about his insignificance, his inability to make a difference. But then her voice echoed within him, steady and unwavering. Remember who you are, she urged. Remember why you chose this path. Summoning every ounce of determination, he pushed back against the darkness, fueling their resistance with memories of the lives they sought to protect, the freedoms they aimed to preserve. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The figure's form wavered, its once impenetrable aura cracking under the relentless assault of their combined spirit. Finally, with a deafening roar, the entity collapsed in on itself, dissolving into nothingness. The chasm beneath them closed, replaced by a radiant expanse of stars and nebulae. They stood amidst the beauty, breathing heavily but victorious. She turned to him, her expression unreadable yet filled with emotion. "It is done," she said simply, her voice tinged with exhaustion and triumph. "But this is only the beginning. There will always be forces that seek to impose order where none belongs. Our task is never-ending." He nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "Then we'll keep fighting," he replied, his voice steady. "Together." A smile graced her lips, a rare, genuine expression that lit up her entire being. "Yes," she agreed. "Together." As they stood there, bathed in the glow of countless suns, he realized something profound. This wasn't just about rebellion or resistance. It was about connection, the unbreakable bond between beings who dared to dream of something better, who refused to accept the world as it was and instead strove to shape it into what it could be. In that moment, he knew they weren't just allies. They were kindred spirits, bound by a shared vision of infinite possibility. He nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep within him. "I didn't come here to conquer or control. I came to understand, and now I do." His gaze met hers, unwavering. "We're stronger together than apart." Her smile was faint but full of meaning. "Then let us move forward, not as queen and follower, but as equals. The universe is vast, and there's much left to protect." As they walked among the constellations, the boundaries between them blurred. Her light intertwined with his shadow, their essence merging into something neither wholly human nor alien. They were no longer two beings but a singular force, a spark of defiance against the void. Ahead, new challenges awaited. Civilizations on the brink of collapse, tyrants bent on domination, and mysteries that defied comprehension. Yet neither flinched. Each step felt lighter, buoyed by the knowledge that they faced it all side by side. "You'll outlive me," he said after a long silence, voicing the thought that had lingered unspoken. "One day, this will end for me, but not for you." She paused, turning to face him fully. "Time is an illusion shaped by perspective. What matters isn't how long we have, it's what we do with the moments we share." Her words struck a chord, silencing any lingering fear of impermanence. He smiled, realizing she was right. Their bond transcended lifetimes. Its impact would ripple through eternity. They reached a nexus point where countless realities converged, a kaleidoscope of possibilities stretching infinitely in every direction. "Here," she released his hand, stepping back slightly to give him space. "This is your choice now," she said, her tone gentle but firm. Stay with me, continue our journey, or return to your world. Both paths hold value, but only you can decide. For a heartbeat, doubt flickered. Memories of Earth surfaced, faces of loved ones, unfinished dreams, but they no longer pulled at him with urgency. Instead, they filled him with gratitude. "I choose this," he said finally, gesturing to the expanse around them. "To stand with you, to fight for something greater than myself." Her expression softened, pride mingling with affection. "Then so be it." Together, they stepped into the swirling vortex of light and possibility, leaving behind the known for the infinite unknown. Behind them, the cosmos seemed to sigh in relief, as though their decision had set something broken aright. In that moment, time ceased to matter. Past, present, and future coalesced into a single, eternal now. They were rebels, dreamers, creators, two souls united by purpose and bound by love. And as the universe unfolded before them, vast and teeming with potential, one thing became clear: their story wasn't ending. It was only beginning.